You're listening to Love is the Answer, a podcast that explores the power of love in real life, with your hosts, Lynn and Laurel Elstrom.
Welcome, everyone, to Love is the Answer, a podcast that explores the power of love in real life. And I'm Lynn Kidd with my co-host, Laurel Elstrom. And today we're going to be talking about finding the courage to love with our guest joining us from the UK, Anjula Ram.
Thank you, Lynn. Before we get into our talk today, we want to take a minute to thank our producer, Rodrigo Carres. Rodrigo generously donates his time and skill to produce this podcast and the Heart to Heart video series, as well as a multitude of Course of Love projects. We could not do it without you, Rodrigo. Thank you.
So let's bring in our guest, Anjula Ram. Anjula is of African and Indian descent and was born in the UK, and she migrates back and forth between the UK and the US, according to where her work and her adventures take her. She is best described as a journalist filmmaker, combining her gift for visual art with social interaction. Anjula, welcome to Love is the Answer. It's such an honor to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate us coming together like this.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to begin by asking you the first question that we ask all of our guests, which is, what does love mean to you?
Well, I feel it's a word, right? So that's where the kind of challenge starts to come in, is to try and put words on it. I would just say it's the feeling of being alive. The feeling of knowing that there's only one life force that's moving through all of us, that's in the seen and the unseen. That energy, that life force, as the one, as the many, to me is love. When I studied alcohol back in 2018, one of the big realizations I had was that I had so misunderstood love, because I had taken on all these ideas and concepts of what love is and what love isn't. And that really tripped me up for a long time. I was trying to be loving. And then once I realized I had misunderstood love, and there isn't anything that can really exist outside of love, it reoriented me where I don't have to try anymore. Because it just is what it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to clarify, maybe not all of our listeners know what you mean when you say a call. You're referring to a course of love.
Yeah, thank you, Anjula. That was beautiful. I really felt a nice energy with that. And so my question is, I've heard you speak about it takes courage to love. Since love is all there is, doesn't love just sort of happen naturally, or is there something else going on here?
Well, I feel that love is the true nature of life, and yet in our life experiences, we get conditioned with so much that feels to me out of alignment with love, what love truly is. So when I speak of courage, it's not even that we have to seek or find love. It's the courage to be something more than what we've learned we are. As I gave the example of, I had taken on all these ideas about what love is and then realized, oh, wow, I've got this all wrong. That's actually something that's happened throughout my life in many, many ways. It's like almost a blanket experience now, where I tend to question everything. And the reason I do that, and it takes a lot of courage, is because when we are not questioning everything or being in the present, all these terms that we use, we're kind of living by default, which means we're living by the things we've learned from our families, our friends, our ancestors. The world we live in has so much layered on it that I feel it takes a lot of courage to unravel that and to show up in life where we're not playing into those paradigms and games and ideas.
It takes courage because you have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. Is that what I hear you saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's all just one life force, but there's this process of me having to step outside of what's comfortable within myself, because it's admitting that I brought into stuff that and felt it was true when it wasn't. And then it's a whole other level of courage to show up in a world that will keep insisting that these ideas are the way to go. But for me to say, no, I'm not co-signing that anymore. I'm losing even the desire to convince other people, you shouldn't co-sign that, or that's based in fear, like that's based in love. That's not my work anymore. My work is for me to be love and to show up in the world in the best way I can, being loved, which takes courage, because when we've taken on, especially with women, I feel we have this people pleaser aspect that we've taken on because we get called, we're more nurturing, we're more caring, and all of this stuff.
I was just going to say, one thought that came to me was, I really love that word courage, and it's actually the Latin root for that is cur. And you know what that means in Latin? Heart. Isn't that beautiful?
Why I feel it takes so much courage. Like I said, it takes courage for me when I'm turning inwards and to be radically honest with myself. And it takes a lot of courage to show up in that way in the world, because if you've been the people pleaser, if you've always been there for people in a certain way, and now you're showing up differently, it messes with their beliefs and their paradigms of who you are and what role you play in their life. And sometimes there can be a backlash with that. And therefore, I say it does take courage in being love and showing up in love. Sometimes it's not as pretty and as cute and as comforting to other people as I once used to show up. So that's some serious tension spots that I have to embrace and allow. And that takes courage to be in the tension.
I find that in the effort to be authentically loving, it takes a lot of courage to let go of my old coping mechanisms. Trying to find a comfort level no matter what was the old goal. And the new goal is trying to be authentically myself and tell the truth and look at the truth and have a genuine exchange with other people. And it takes courage because it's not always comfortable. You talk about integrating the masculine and the feminine. I'd just like you to just share just a couple of, just an idea or two of how you do that.
More so than focusing on integrating the masculine and feminine, I'm more grounded in embracing the opposites. When we have ideas that we have to be either more left or more right, am I more masculine, am I more feminine? I'm going to show up how that life force wants to show up through me. My job is not to try to reject things and push things out, because the embrace holds all things. So for me, the idea of embracing the masculine and feminine, integrating the two, the masculine has been kind of understood more as an energy force that's in movement, and the feminine has been understood more as like stillness, embracing. And instead of trying to be one or the other, in my work, I like to embrace both the masculine and feminine and integrate them in me and allow it to show up. To me, the embracing of those opposites is the foundation of wholeness. And I'm about wholeness. I'm not about fragmentation. That doesn't resonate with me.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anjula. My next question is, I really loved your film, that you did in 2018, Essays from the Heart, Emergence from Within. If you could share a couple of ideas about what that experience was like for you.
Well, actually, it really ties into exactly what we've talked about so far.
Okay.
One was the integration. I was at that time, I had a piece that I did for my graduate program, having lived in lots of different environments. At that time, I had come out of California, and I very much into the spiritual kind of concepts and kind of a little bit up there with we're all one, and maybe not honoring the diversity as much. And I'm spiritual, this humanness isn't so cool type of a mindset. And the journey that led up to me doing that piece was actually understanding and integrating I'm both, right? So spiritual and human are just ideas we've put on top of ways of kind of, I guess, how we show up or what we prioritize. And that film to me was my journey of integrating and embracing both the spiritual dimensions of myself and the human dimensions of myself, and not leaving any part of my experience out, because this is all about experience, a lived experience. So if I start leaning into I'm too spiritual, I'm not very human, I'm rejecting part of my experience, and vice versa. So on one level, that film project was my journey of that integration. And on another level, going back to courage, for me, I was doing a master's program in journalism, and the schools and the professors and, they wanted me to do some more reporting, proper journalism. And that didn't resonate with me. So it was a really intense journey of me having to keep saying, no, that doesn't feel right to me. This feels right to me, and doing whatever I needed to do to allow something to be created through me that I felt wanted to be created through me. So that whole film project was the integration of my masculine and feminine, my spiritual and physical, and also really living into the idea of having the courage to be love as it's expressed through me as an individuated being.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't do the other type of journalism. If that resonates with you, go for it. But I didn't go to school to pick up another concept and live into that. I wanted to create what wanted to be created through me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I hear like you wanted to move into something new, fresh, and alive, and that was a creation. It wasn't just about holding on to certain concept and programming about what journalism should be like. I totally get that. Thank you for sharing that. Did you want to share why you chose filmmaking as your primary method of connecting with people? You're a journalist filmmaker.
Yeah, that's the title I use at this time. It's just words again to try to encompass what's coming through. I don't actually feel like I choose anymore anything. I feel like I get chosen to create something, not because I'm special, but we're all chosen if we listen, because we're all important equally. Therefore, I do use the title of a journalist filmmaker because it's what resonates with what wants to be created through me at this time. But I've also, through experience, learned where the error can really come in of me now projecting myself in some ideal image of a journalist filmmaker and thinking that's what I'm always going to be. I don't know what's going to happen next. I just have to stay open and move with what resonates through me.
That's the cool part.
It is. It's living in the unknown. It can get uncomfortable. But I find it's so much fun. It's like an experiment, living in adventure, and I actually feel alive. I feel the love. I feel alive. When I try to put myself in boxes, I feel I'm killing parts of myself off. So I refuse to do it.
That's great.
Beautiful.
Well, we are getting close to the end of our time, and we need to move to the question of the week. Please join us, Anjula, as the three of us consider this question. I want to behave lovingly toward people, but I'm not interested in being fake or disingenuous. How is love the answer to connecting authentically with people I don't actually like? We'll let you go first, Anjula.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I feel this like intrinsic love for everyone. And yet sometimes I don't vibe with everyone, and that can change, right, over time and space. I really just check in with myself in the present moment and what I feel directed to do. So it might be to move closer to that person, it might be to speak, it might be to not. But one kind of my anchoring point is in that present moment. If I know that it's the same life force that's moving through me and the perceived other, then I can trust whatever wants to move through me. In that present moment, if I feel separated from that individual, like on an essence level, if I feel totally disconnected, then for me, I try not to do anything. It feels like it would just spiral into just drama. I want to go back inwards. I want to go home. I want to retreat. I want to get back to the truth in me, because that's what I can trust. If I'm not aware that we have the same life force running through us, then I can't trust how I'm going to show up in that moment.
Lynn, what would you say to that question?
Yeah, I have a similar points probably to make. Anjula has already shared. It's interesting, yesterday in our Course of Love Zoom group, we had a big discussion about this. We're on day 8 in the 40 days and 40 nights of A Course of Love, which is accept the present. And this turned into a huge dialogue yesterday. It was really beautiful. But I would say the first thing, someone had brought out that through, as Anjula mentioned earlier, about the programming and all the conditioning that we've been through, most of us are not comfortable with just showing up in the moment and expressing ourselves in this moment, a true, authentic, and that includes our feelings. We're so conditioned and programmed, and we're always worrying about, as Anjula mentioned, the people pleasing. Am I going to say something that's going to hurt somebody else's feelings? I'm not going to be liked. For me, I agree with that. I'm better at it, but I'm not always 100% there and showing up how I absolutely 100% feel in each moment. So to me, it's always going to be going back to the inner is where I should start from. Not should, but that's the point of truth. That's the point of clarity, is if I go within and get in touch with my own feelings. That's the only way I feel that there's going to be any true response. If it comes from conditioning, an old pattern, it's not a true response. If everything is being filtered through that conditioning and those patterns, there's fragmentation in it. It's about old concept. There's nothing new about it. So I would say that it's always about touching into those feelings, whatever is arising in this moment, and being okay with that 100%. And I'm not always there. And then the other thing, if I'm in a place with others and I'm being triggered, again, it points back to me. It's never about the other person. It's like what in me is being triggered, and where am I not in relationship with who I am in this moment. So I feel like if I'm in my truth and I'm standing in my truth, I'm with the whole experience, the true response will arise. And then I may say yes and I may say no. I may set a boundary. The big cap on all of it is what Anjula mentioned earlier, and I think maybe you did too, Laurel, is it's all a gift. That's where we have to realize that my brother is my savior, my sister is my savior. It says that in the Course of Miracles, the Course of Love, that everything is a gift. And the only reason that these things come around again is because we have not seen these as gifts. That's my response.
So I'm going to take a turn at this too. And that is that before we started recording today, we opened with a prayer with a recognition that we share the same heart. And I find it really important to remember that, and especially in circumstances when there's somebody who's behaving in a way that seems harmful. And recently I heard John Lewis in a recording where he talked about the training that they had when they were training to be freedom riders, and how, they did the things that we know about, how to protect yourself physically when you're being beaten. He said in this interview something I hadn't heard before, that they were actually trained to love their oppressors.
Mm.
And that when they are being beaten, to look their oppressor in the eye, because it's very difficult for one human being to hurt another when there's eye contact. And what's more, they were trained to see their oppressor as they were as a child before the conditioning was layered on them. And in that way, by looking at that person who's beating you as a little child who's been trained to hate, but you see them as the child they were before, that you can find that shared heart in that moment. So I've really taken that in and made it a part of my practice to really look for the shared heart, especially at this time in the world when there seems to be so much polarity, and we're aware of oppression, and recognizing that there's really only one heart here doing its thing in all kinds of different forms.
Yeah, thank you, Laurel. That was beautiful.
Thank you. May I add something very quickly that was arising within me from the whole dialogue of kind of connecting some dots? And it's almost like a little caution as well, which I remind myself of as well, is when we experience something, we naturally want to kind of like grasp it like that's the way and then go into repeat mode. Like how I was describing of like the title's just the title right now for me in the work that I do. Being of Indian and African descent, there is, as you know, so many different gods and goddesses, right? And there's one heart, how you just said, Laurel. And these are just different manifestations of that one heart. How we respond to a situation is going to look one way for a Saraswati. It's going to look a different way for a Kali Ma. It's going to look a different way for the goddess Isis. It's going to look a different way for, all the diversity. And so as we move through this experience of time and space, to stay present and slightly less attached with what it looks like as the answer, but to remember what that inner part, the answer arises from there. And it can look different on different days with different beings.
Yes. Thank you for that follow-up there, Anjula. That's about all the time we have for today. So I wanted to give a big thank you to Anjula for joining us today. And be sure to listen next time when our guest will be Suzanne Quinney, who will also be joining us from the UK. And we will be talking about living in community.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Anjula. Thank you to everyone who's joined us on Love is the Answer, and we will see you next time.